Welcome everybody to the ACLU of Ohio's YouTube channel. You may know us from our work in the courthouse or our work in the state house, but today we're trying something a little different and we're coming to your house. We're going to talk about the news that's driving the national conversation, and we're going to give the ACLU of Ohio's perspective on it. Now, the ACLU is actually built for moments like these. From our founding in 1920, we have been at the head of social change movements across America. From fighting Japanese internment during World War II, desegregating our public school system, expanding rights of the accused, to more. The ACLU of Ohio fights the government. It's what we're built for. It's what we're known for. And we're fucking good at it. So, it makes sense that we want to take some time and talk about what we're seeing across the country, especially in Minneapolis and Minnesota, as it pertains to ICE and immigration enforcement in the Trump administration. So, we're going to have a conversation today. We're going to hope to give some context, some clarity, basically answer the question, how did we get here? And why free speech means a free country. Let's get into it. Alrighty. So we're joined today with ACLU of Ohio staff attorney Carlene Zhang DeSouza. Carlene, how are you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm good. How are you?
You're doing okay?
I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been pretty heavy lately. I mean, not gonna lie, everybody, the national conversation obviously very focused on the murder, that we'll call it, of two American citizens, but also just the overall breach of public trust, of norms, and of just our moral fiber as Americans. Like, I want to hear you talk about basically just your gut reaction, just your reactions to what we've seen in Minneapolis with ICE, with the protests, with the response from the Trump administration to local officials, the governor and mayor in Minneapolis, and just share your take as an attorney and as a person. What do you see?
So I do have a lot of thoughts about this. I think there is definitely, obviously, a lot of big bad, being like DHS has expanded enormously beyond what can even be controlled, and that has led to a lot of what has happened. And it's not even just, of course, the detentions, but also, of course, the deaths of the two American citizens that we've heard the most about, but there's also Keith Porter and a huge number of people who have died in detention facilities. And I think that's an overarching theme of this administration. It's a lot of move fast, break things. And when it's the federal government moving fast and breaking things, that has huge ripple effects on all of us throughout all our lives. But I do want to uplift a lot of the good that has been forced out of this situation. And I think I see the most American thing ever, which is strangers getting together with strangers to help strangers. And I think we've seen a lot of personal responsibility for public life. Even though I didn't necessarily approve this administration, and I don't know those people who are getting detained or being pepper sprayed at protests, I still, and I think a lot of people still care very deeply about what's happening to them. We know that freedom and dignity and community are so important to everyone, and when we see people being horribly deprived of it like this, not just in clear violation of many constitutional rights, but just on a deep moral human level, we want to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are, people are having a shock to the system when they're seeing ICE in the streets, brutalizing people, pepper spraying them, shooting them. And it's been interesting because the reaction is just, yes, this is very scary, it's very dangerous, this is not what America should be. But it's interesting to think because for a lot of Americans, this is kind of how it is. When you look at the over-police presence in most of our major cities, in poor neighborhoods, black and brown neighborhoods where police are constantly patrolling, I think there's a lot of parallels between what people are feeling in Minneapolis and across the country as it regards to ICE, but also how some of our, black and brown neighbors feel every day for their local police department. I do want to touch on what you said though about how, when we're looking at all of the harm being created by ICE, when I see those stories, people dying in captivity, protesters being shot, it just becomes more and more clear to me that what ICE is doing is not about immigration. Like, this is not what a faithful enforcement of immigration law looks like. Now, you're an attorney. Walk us through what would a faithful enforcement of immigration law look like if it was actually being done on the up and up and not by masked thugs in bulletproof vests that have ICE labels on them.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to explain this would be first to sort of take a step back. So we're talking about federal government here. We're not talking about state or local. And there's the legislature, judiciary, and the executive branches, right? And now we're talking about executive. And specifically, so under the executive branch, there's a bunch of agencies, right? And we're talking about the DHS, which is the Department of Homeland Security. And so DHS has a couple agencies underneath it, and we're talking about ICE and also CBP. So ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. CBP is Customs and Border Protection. They both do essentially the same thing, but just in different places. They do immigration enforcement, CBP on the border, and then ICE in the interior of the country. And then ICE also has divisions underneath, and we're talking specifically about ERO, which is Enforcement and Removal Operations. And this is what people have been seeing a lot of. It's the apprehension, detention, and deportation of undocumented people. And so I think the best way to frame this is kind of talk about how past administrations have dealt with this. Past administrations, in very broad strokes, generally focused on deporting people and investigating people who had criminal records. And they also had a general policy of not going to schools, hospitals, or places of worship. And now things have changed markedly. And so I'll characterize it in terms of the who, the where, and the how. So the who is, it's all undocumented people that they're going after, and just sort of generally just brown and black people, if we're going to be totally honest.
But when they always say this is a targeted enforcement operation, it doesn't look targeted.
It's not. That is just a misnomer. They just want to call it something fancy, and they're just out there getting people. And Trump has said before also that they're going to go after all undocumented people. So that's a lot of people. And then there's also the where. And so not only are now schools and hospitals and places of worship they're going, but they're also going to places like courthouses where people go for their literal immigration hearings. They go to ICE check-ins where people go to literally check in with ICE to make sure things are going okay. And
which is part of the legal process, correct?
Which is part of the legal process. They're doing it the right way, but it's where they will be. And so that's why ICE is going there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the how, which is one of the biggest places that we've seen change. So first there's the quota. So Trump had set a pretty arbitrary number of 3,000 people detained a day. There's nothing behind that number. Okay, you just picked it because you liked it, I guess. And so now they are trying to get 3,000 people. And that in part explains why they're going to Home Depot, why they're going, to all these other places, because they got to hit the number. And that also explains why they need so many more people. They're hiring and hiring and hiring, it seems blindly, because they need to hit this quota. And then there's also now third country deportations, and that means you get deported to a place that you weren't born or where you weren't living last. That has been a huge change. And then there's also increased relationships with local law enforcement. So you might have heard the term 287G agreements, which essentially deputizes local law enforcement to help ICE with its operations. this is not only expensive for those communities, but it's also deeply damaging to those communities and the trust that local law enforcement tries to build. And then I think the most damaging is how they use immigration enforcement to target free speech.